Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web. It is The System is Down, the place where we talk about all the uncomfortable topics like conspiracies, politics, religion, and how to survive a podcast apocalypse, which is what we're talking about today with Chris Spangle, the one and only Chris Spangle of We Are Libertarians. And we'll get into all that in a moment, but I gotta pump you up a little bit with some intro here. So we'll do that first, and then we'll get down to the real important shit. Here we go.
All I ask is, if we have to give these bastards our lives, we give them hell before we do!
The tragedy of our day is the climate of fear in which we live.
Talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing.
I would ask the congressman to withdraw that comment and tell us that he really means that.
Half of Trump supporters do what I call passive support.
I don't know what I said. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The Bible commands that certain people be put to death.
Thieves were possessing weapons of mass destruction. 9/11 attacks were carried out by Al-Qaeda.
Handle the truth!
I remember that with that smoke. We are still here!
We have to say yes to socialism.
Bet you want to know tomorrow. It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
It is indeed a big club, and you indeed are not in it. Many of you are being removed from it as we speak. Many of you are getting kicked off of platforms like Facebook, like myself. Many of you have one strike left because they're just tired of you bullying, cyberbullying that good sweet old boy Jeffrey Epstein. For whatever the reason, we're being removed from places. But before we get into all that talk, welcome to the new studio. First and foremost, Chris will be my first guest. Let's say in the new studio here. If you're listening to the audio podcast live, shame on you. You should be watching. You should be watching this because I put a lot of blood, sweat, and literal tears into this over the last 48 hours, and I would like for you to experience it with us. But that's enough of that music. Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off. We're not that professional yet. If anybody wants to intern to push the button that turns off my music for me, that would be fantastic. But before we get into the conversation with Chris Spangle, I got to remind you guys about our sponsor, which is you. The lovely folks at the Downers Club, people like Andrew Sitchling, Mark Clare, Shira Valkyrie, Kyle Evans, Paul Brandenberger, Craig DeCosta, Ryan Mortensen, and a bunch of others that I'm not going to bother reading. If you want to see them, you should have watched the video, like I said. But there's a lot of them there, and they're awesome. They're the people that make this wonderful thing happen, that keep us growing and getting bigger and better and more beautiful every single week. And they do so by signing up for the Downers Club at patreon.com/The System is Down, where you will get more weird, more raw, more offensive, and more weekly content, including what I can only hope is the bonus content with our guest today, who is this guy. Chris Spangle. We Are Libertarians. Chris Spangle, how's it going, man?
Things are going really well. Very well, indeed. Good. I love the new studio. I love all the newspapers. I did not realize you were in the Cincinnati area. I did not know we live so close to each other.
Things can be purchased online. And
I love the look. It looks fantastic. And you should definitely go check out the video. It's well worth it.
Amen. I would say the same. But yeah, Chris, I haven't had you on in a couple years, probably. I had you on early on in this show, and yeah, it's I've been meaning to have you back on, but you know, time gets away from you.
It's very difficult. We're very busy men with important podcasts and rooms to rearrange and podcasts to shuffle around. Yes. I totally understand. I did
spouses to aggravate with our incessant self-obsessions.
My girlfriend will walk in here at any moment, ready to say hi, and then she'll go because I do like an interview a day. It seems like at this point, and so they always walk in quietly. They don't even knock anymore, right? Because it's the podcaster life.
That's right. Well, at least yours is, respectful enough to know what's going on. Mine, even though she was my co-host and still is from time to time, still acts like it's a surprise every time she walks in and I'm podcasting. But it is.
We're not married yet.
It's all good. So the last time you were on the show, your podcast was We Are Libertarians, and you've kind of had a branding shift. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
A little bit, yeah. So, as We Are Libertarians started in 2012. If you don't know the show at all, it's one of the longest running libertarian podcasts around now. Once we got rid of Libertarian Solutions, we were right up there. And it started as a single podcast, and we've had around 22, 23 different shows on the network. We had a bunch of shows in 2013, and that kind of ebbed. And then around 2 years ago, a little less than that, we started adding shows. The Brian Nichols show has really taken off. On the Run with Remzo Martinez has taken off. Gingerarchy with Trisha Stewart. She's starting to produce episodes again. And as the libertarian movement, like 5 years ago, because we're almost on our 9th year. Mm-hmm. You 5, 6, 7 years ago, you talk about like the top of the diamond versus the bottom of the diamond, because you were doing the Nolan chart, and the argument was between the 100% libertarians who are okay with a little bit of government, and then the total abolitionists. And now everything seems to have gone back to left and right. And what I noticed over the last year is my opinions and Brian's opinions and Remzo's opinions and Trisha's opinions and the 20 different people's opinions that we have on the network really started to vary through a presidential year like it hadn't before. Mm-hmm. And it put pressure on those other hosts, because if I have an opinion that is counter to what a lot of other libertarians think, then they start getting, can you come get your boy? which is not in the spirit of what I want to do at We Are Libertarians, which is really offer up a wide variety of libertarian opinion across the spectrum, have respectful debate, and people shouldn't be held to my opinion just because I run the joint. And I've thought about changing the name of the main flagship podcast for since 2014, 2015. I mean, so I wanted to do it for a while. And so the Chris Spangle show was a brief podcast, and I just decided that's just the easiest thing. And we really try to talk to normies, and it's really hard to get people to listen to a podcast.
They love it when you call them normies.
They do.
That's what brings them in.
And so, when you share a podcast with your wife, I'll get this message a lot. Like, hey, I finally got my wife to listen to the Chris Spangle show because I couldn't get her to listen to We Are Libertarians. Mm-hmm. Thanks. It just makes it a little bit easier for it to share around. And they couldn't get her to listen to it just because it sounded like a boring political podcast, or what? People don't want to be indoctrinated. They don't want to be, it's like The System Is Down is the perfect name, because it kind of it's not political, right? So it could be about anything, and you're beholden to the title you've chosen. So, so that's kind of why we decided to go that route. So far, so good. I mean, I've got nothing but compliments. I mean, it hasn't affected numbers or, really anything. So I have no idea, but we may look back 5 years and go, what a horrible mistake that was, or what a brilliant move. I don't know.
Yeah. It's funny you say The System Is Down is good because it's vague, but I've run into, I've debated on throwing libertarian into my name or something, because that'll automatically, it's like when you're in a Christian band, if you say you're a Christian band, then you get the automatic hits. If you're a libertarian podcast, then you get the libertarians to at least dip their toe in. I show up at libertarian events, and I have people like Roger Paxton who are like, are you even a libertarian? I don't even know. And I'm like, well, you should have listened to the fucking show, man.
Well, that's Roger's bag. I mean, when Roger was, Roger's now yelling at pigs in New Hampshire, but before that, he was telling everybody they weren't a real libertarian. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no doubt that you get a ton of SEO from having your title be We Are Libertarians, but and there's a gamble on that, but I'm willing to take risks. And I think if you run a platform, if you run a podcast, if you do all kinds of the work that you and I do, you've got to take risks. You've got to kind of evolve the product constantly. and keep it fresh. And if you're saying and doing the same thing in the same way 9 years from when you started the show, you're not growing, you know. Right. And I think you got to take some risks that kind of scare you a little bit. And changing the name because of that SEO factor was a scary thing, but so far so good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and while I say I thought about putting libertarian in, I'm glad I didn't, because do you ever have like concern, even with We Are Libertarians, do you have concern like the Overton window shifting so much to the extent that you're not a libertarian because the title changes or the party shifts its name or whatever, or shifts its messaging?
No, I think there's the something happened when Ron Paul embraced Donald Trump. And when I joined in 2007, because I was a Paulie, I don't know what you call a Paul, but he was very anti-Republican.
I think they're called racists, actually.
Okay, all right. Your words, not mine. I don't send Dan Smots the emails. Right. When I joined in 2008 and started self-identifying as a libertarian, it was equally anti-Republican and anti-Democrat, and foreign policy was no doubt the central issue. And we're over a decade out from foreign policy really being the central issue. And right now, the culture wars are at the center of what everybody talks about. And that is not necessarily the domain. I mean, a libertarian talks about a person's relationship to the state, not people's relationships to each other. I'm somewhat interested in that, and I've always kind of talked about sociological aspects and what makes a healthy society and culture. But that's not really what a libertarian is, right? I mean, and so when we would talk about some of the sociological things, I would get a lot of times, well, what is a libertarian doing talking about social issues? So it's a little bit easier if it's the Chris Spangle show. When Ron Paul kind of embraced Trumpism and Rand Paul embraced Trumpism, so went the movement in a lot of ways, and really started to embrace Republicans and the Republican Party in a way that was always kind of latently there, but at least they had some lip service to say, like, I'm against the duopoly. And I've just noticed over the last couple years that there's so much about Trump's movement that has overlapping features with a lot of what libertarians talk about. And, I think it's easy to kind of get sucked into that and start to identify with some of that stuff. So I don't feel that I've shifted all that much. I'm still kind of doing a lot of what I'm doing, but I feel like everybody else is just going a different direction sometimes. And there's no doubt that over the past year, I felt more and more out of place amongst some of my colleagues and friends. But I'm going to keep doing the show that I do and talking about the things that I care about in the way that I care about, and talking about our, how to reduce the size and scope of government in the way that I do it. And if that's not for everybody, I'm not worried about that.
Now, by everybody else kind of shifting, do you mean like just the Trump love that some of the libertarians were giving out, and you were more of a never Trumper, right? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I wasn't. I mean, I was against the first impeachment. My attitude towards Trump has always been, he's a piece of crap human being who kind of gets an unfair shake.
Sure.
There's the media is hopelessly leftist, and he never really got a fair shake. It was obvious from the very beginning that his campaign never had the ability or the inclination to collude with Russia, even if Russia did interfere in the election, and the constant drum of impeachment was unhelpful, and it backfired. I mean, my message was always, keep your powder dry, save it for when the guy does something that is truly impeachable and really not good, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I just always found him kind of funny, right? Like he wasn't when he did do things, many of them were in the right direction, right? Like tax cuts and, breaking the interventionist fever in the Republican Party is his greatest legacy. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But once you get to 2020 and he's faced with a real test, and he completely blows testing. He completely blows the beginning of the pandemic, which is really what causes the majority of the harm, because all of a sudden, if you don't have the ability to get a test, you don't have good information, right? Every other country seemed to nail it, and our CDC and FDA didn't. Yeah. And then we get into George Floyd, and he's threatening the Americans with the 82nd Airborne. And you're just like, what kind of most libertarian president is that?
Sure.
And it just got more and more ridiculous. And where I would probably break with a lot of other of my fellow libertarian podcasters is that I think liberal democratic capitalism for now is our best bet. And breaking from that, breaking from democracy, is a bad idea, because we don't know what's on the other side of that. You want stability, and you want to stick with the system that has brought about a halving. I mean, if you look at since 1990, global poverty has been cut in half because of the expansion of liberal democratic capitalism. You know, classical liberalism, not FDR liberalism. Right. So I just think he became more and more obscene through 2020. I think he became more and more authoritarian, and I think it was a mistake for a lot of libertarians not to just say that, because they were afraid of being told they had Trump derangement syndrome.
Right.
You know, like that in and of itself is a propagandistic tactic to keep you in line. Well, no, fuck you. Yeah. You know, I'm going to say what I think, and I'm not going to worry about, you know, a bunch of people screaming TDS at me.
Absolutely. And I can agree with you on most of those points. We're definitely not here to talk about Trump today, though.
Sure.
Now, simple yes or no question, simple yes or no answer to this, because if it's a certain answer, we'll save it for bonus, and we'll get a little bit more spicy there. But do you believe that he should have? You said that you didn't think he should have been impeached the first time. Do you believe he should have been impeached this last time?
100%, without a doubt, absolutely.
Simple yes or no answer, Chris.
Yes.
All right, we'll talk about that in bonus, because that'll be fun. But what we're here to talk about more so than politics or any of this stuff, well, I guess it's still relevant to politics, as, you know, if you are of a certain leaning, you are more likely to get removed. What is your take on this censorship, and, you know, as it pertains to Trump, even as it pertains to myself, as it pertains to probably you any day now, if not already? Where do you see where we're at right now?
Yeah, we've definitely seen all of our abilities on all four of the major platforms curbed and limited, starting with 2018 and interviewing Liberty memes, and it's kind of been a general slide since then.
Yeah,
I think these platforms are beholden to corporations and corporate money, and politics in general is not what most people really want to see on these platforms, and they know it.
Yeah.
And so they're taking steps to eventually remove politics from their platforms, and they're starting with the minority culture of political opinions. You know, if you're talking just blatant right and left, the right has less people in its camp than the left on these social media platforms, and so they have less ability to fight back. And they're less taken seriously by the corporate press, because, surprise, when you make the corporate press the enemy since 1946, they tend to not like you. Yeah. So I think there's no doubt that it hits conservatives and libertarians harder. I was first on this wall when Austin Peterson got hit in his campaign against Josh Hawley. It was obvious that it was going to start spreading from, you know, they start with the sex workers and the hackers, and then the conspiracy theorists with Alex Jones, and then they were going to move to libertarians and then conservatives. And it was just a matter of time starting. You saw it in 2018. You saw it with Glenn Beck talking to Zuckerberg about the moderation in 2017. And that's when I really started to diversify what we do, because it scared the shit out of me when Alex Jones gets removed from all these platforms in a single day.
Right.
And there's, you know, I was just about to sign up for a service that I could barely afford at $123 a month with Spreaker. And that week they banned Alex Jones, and I just emailed him and I said, I'm not going to give you this much money if you don't really respect opinion. Right. And I talked to them, and they had no real good explanation other than all these other companies did it. And we wanted to be in the press releases. So I I tend to think that it's more about
Wait.
them laying the
They
groundwork.
they only did it because they wanted attention for it?
I definitely think that that's a huge part of it. I think when Donald Trump gets banned from Facebook and Twitter, you know, every other company that nobody's ever seen Donald Trump on their platform, like Spotify, sends out a press release so they can get their logo up on the Fox News panel.
Yeah.
You know, it's virtue signaling. It's corporate virtue signaling. So I think there's some ideological aspect to it, but I think a lot of it is about profit. It's about who are they trying to market themselves to and protect their profits.
Yeah. So where do you see this going? Like, you've taken some steps. You've told me about minimally, and to set this up a little bit, basically, you know, a couple of weeks back, I was having this problem where I got kicked off of Facebook twice. We are no longer there. We're not going back. But and I've had my issues with YouTube. But for you, as a podcaster who's been doing this much longer than I, probably, you said about 9 years, right?
My first podcast was 2007.
Okay.
And then, but yeah, 9 years with Wall.
Okay. So yeah, you've been doing this more than double what I've been doing. So you've got some steps in place to protect yourself. What are some of the things that you've done to avoid this? Like with Alex Jones and all that going down, were you set up for this stuff? Like, were you ready for it before that, or did that kind of scare you into action?
That was when I decided that we needed to diversify.
Yeah.
And that was around the time that we started our Patreon. So it gave me a little bit of cash for some of these monthly services. That was the writing on the wall, because while I've never been permabanned, we've never been outright removed. Like, you can't get to the wall, Instagram or Twitter, without typing in the you know, same with my personal, you have to type in exactly the name. You know, I've noticed the throttling on our Facebook page. Unless you just blatantly post, you're not going to get any kind of traction on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, when you post, you can get 1 million. We have 100,000 on our Facebook. You can get 1 million impressions a month if you post. You can get 100,000. You can get 50,000 if you just post your links.
Right. You're rewarded for pissing people off.
For bad behavior, right? And so I've made the decision that I don't want to play in those sandboxes, really. But when I saw it heading that direction, I really think that the direction that we're heading is 1997 with blog rolls and emails. And I think it's really important for a creator to have their website, you know, together, and then also to have an email list. And all this, I know that people will pull out, well, MailChimp does this, and look at them going after Cloudflare. But for the majority of creators, they're not going to make a special example of you and me and others. I mean, they're going to go after some of the, you know, you're not.
Oh, I'm trying. I'm trying.
I know.
I got a MailChimp as soon as my shit went down, and immediately started posting through email instead. So we'll see how long that lasts. But I'll let you guys know if that goes down too, so you can be warned that they're cracking down as well.
But I think while the tools are, you know, the tools are not there from the alternative economy. I think there's why is Gab still up? Well, Gab got taken down in the Alex Jones sweep in 2018, and they built their own systems, right? And now you're going to see Parler and all of these companies go to that. You know, I've been disappointed in Cloudflare when Cloudflare said the biggest mistake was taking down the Daily Stormer, and then they'll never do that again. They'll never take down a website. And then they did it less than a month ago. You kind of go, okay, well, these people, when they say they're repentant, they're probably not, because at the end of the day, what puts food on my table and your table is what's going to motivate us, right? So, if the New York Times and Oliver Darcy at CNN are coming after you, you're probably going to fold. So, you know, in the meantime, over the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot of decentralized systems set up to provide. Like, you can watch Alex Jones. Like, Alex Jones didn't disappear. Right. He disappeared from Facebook and Twitter. And the more that they do that, the less people are going to use it. I mean, if you go into the back of your Facebook page, I'm losing about 100 people a week, I think, to deactivation on our Facebook page.
Right.
So
even if you're still there, your audience is getting removed one by one anyway, so it doesn't really matter because you attracted the boosters.
It's not getting removed. They're literally quitting and walking away.
Okay.
I can show you how to do it, but like you go into the back, you go into likes, you go into insights, go to likes, and you go to unsubscribes, and you look at the amount of people that have unsubscribed.
Right.
Like it's thousands of people have just walked away from Facebook on our page, and they've gone to other places. And so the diaspora is underway. Like these companies have killed themselves. Now they're having to pay news outlets. They're being gored. It doesn't matter if you're left or right, center, libertarian, socialist, whatever. Everybody hates Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So everybody recognizes them as societal ills. So other things are going to be built up over time. But while we have that kind of transitionary period, use tools like Bluehost and MailChimp and some of these other things to start, Substack, to start building your stuff elsewhere. I mean, we have one main host. It's called Megaphone that feeds the majority of the wall shows, my personal shows. Mm-hmm. Then we have Fireside, and I have a mirror basically of my main feed on fireside.fm. And then I also post all of our episodes to SoundCloud, and I post them to Spreaker. So I have 4 podcast hosts. So if I were for some reason shut down on one, I still have 3, and I can drive with a 301 redirect to any one of those services. That's one example. I have 2 different email services in Substack and in MailChimp. I back up obsessively. I backed up our Facebook page. It took 3 weeks. It took 2 days to download it, and it was like 97 gigs of memes. I just think you have to, if you're a libertarian and if you have libertarian in your name, you have to just recognize that at some point that asset will be taken from you. And so I've stopped actively posting to our Facebook page. I've stopped actively posting to our Instagram. That's 120,000 likes. That's a lot of people for a small podcast. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think they're good for society. I don't want to rely on them, and I've got to force myself to walk away from it.
Absolutely. And let's dig into that deeper. Let's get down even deeper than that. But before we do, I got to kick out of YouTube because YouTube doesn't like when we get deeper. YouTube doesn't like when we have real human conversations and interactions with each other. YouTube doesn't like, growth and expanding our knowledge. So for all of you that are YouTubers, we're going to say goodbye to you and come listen to the rest of the conversation at tsidpod.com. And check out Chris Spangle at wearelibertarians.com. Check out the Chris Spangle Show and everything else that he's got going on. And we'll be right back after this.